Well, hello and welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. I'm Renee Williams and I'm here with my co-host Billy Thomas, and we both work in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources, and we really appreciate that you're here joining us today.
Yeah, no doubt, Renee. It's awesome to be here with you and with all of our viewers out there, whether you're joining us via Zoom or via Facebook Live. We're really glad to have you with us today. I think we've got another great show. We've got a good lineup of some real solid hitters, and I think we're going to have some good information for everybody today.
Definitely, definitely. Remember, like you said, if you have a comment anytime during their presentations, type it in the chat pod. Also on Facebook Live, if we can't get to it right then, we will definitely get back to you. But we always appreciate any comments, and we always get back to anybody. Make sure to like us on Facebook Live and turn on your notifications so that every time our show gets on, you'll know that we're on.
Yeah, no doubt. So today's show, one of the things we talk about often is about forests and how important they are here in Kentucky and all the things they do. And one thing that often gets overlooked, I believe, is the importance they play in water quality. Our forests play an incredibly important role in protecting our water quality. So we've got a couple of segments today. We've got Dr. Amanda Gumbert on, and she is a water quality extension specialist with the University of Kentucky here in our College of Agriculture, Food and Environment. And Amanda's just a great resource for us. So she's going to be talking about the Ag Water Quality Plan. And then we have Eric Gracie, who's on our UK Forestry and Natural Resources Extension team. He's going to be talking about the best management practices guide that's really tailored to timber harvesting operations. And then we're going to wrap the show up with Laurie Thomas. She's going to be talking about the tree of the week. This is a tree, and I won't spoil it yet, but this tree can get really bigger than any of our other trees in the eastern United States. So just stay tuned for that, and we'll learn about the tree of the week a little bit later.
All right, sounds great. So Dr. Gumbert, if you don't mind turning on your video, we will start out our presentation with you. And thank you so much for joining us today and talking about the Ag Water Quality Plan.
Well, thank you all so much for having me. I'm always excited for an opportunity to talk about water quality. As you said, Billy, forest land is such an important piece of the water quality equation. So I'm always excited to kind of give that little shout out to forests. So let's go ahead and I'll share my screen. Like Billy mentioned, I'm an extension specialist for water quality. And so a big portion of my job is to make sure that our residents know about the Kentucky Ag Water Quality Plan and how to get those implemented on their farms. So, but before I start into Ag Water Quality Plans, I like to show this image. And if you're not familiar with what all those colors are, those are river basins, and the whole mass there outlined in the white line is the Mississippi River Basin. So the Mississippi River drains about 41% of the continental US. And what I want to drive home with this image is just keep in mind that all of the ways we use land in all of those river basins, on all of those streams, on all of those rivers, everything drains to one common location, and that is at the Gulf of Mexico. So the thing that we like to remember is that if it's on the ground, it's in your water. And if you don't remember anything else from today, hopefully you'll remember that if it's on the ground, it's in your water. So let's talk about the Kentucky Ag Water Quality Act. The act was passed in 1994, and it became enforceable law in 2001. And it is simply a set of best management practices, or BMPs, you'll hear us talk a lot about that today, that are going to protect water quality on the farm. And what constitutes a farm in terms of the Ag Water Quality Act is 10 acres or more. And so 10 acres or more involved in agriculture or forestry, those landowners must develop a water quality plan. And also, these plans are needed for applying for state or local cost share programs. And so at the state level, that may be the Kentucky Soil Erosion and Water Quality Cost Share Program. If you go to the Conservation District office in your community, you'll hear them talk about state cost share. That's what that is. And then locally, it might be the CAPE program, the County Ag Investment Program. And some of our counties are in that application process right now. And this year, it is required that a copy of your ag water quality plan be part of your application for the CAPE program. So what is a plan? A plan is a list of BMPs that have been implemented on the farm to protect water quality. And so the image you see on the right is the producer's workbook, and that has been developed to help landowners, farmers develop their own water quality plans. And so the plan is divided into 6 sections, and those are livestock, crops, pesticides and fertilizers, farmsteads, forestry, and streams and other waters. So those are the 6 different sections, and there are BMPs that correlate with each of those sections. Plans should be up to date and reflect the current farm activities. And so folks ask me that a lot. They say, you know, how often should I update my ag water quality plan? Or, you know, I developed mine when this first came out. Is it still good? And usually what I say is that plans should be updated every 2 years at the minimum. And if if you buy a farm or if you sell a tract or something like that, you might want to update it more frequently. But every 2 years is a pretty good rule of thumb that will reflect your current farming activities. And the website that you see here, that is a UK website where you can go to find more information about ag water quality plans and practices, as well as a link to this producer's workbook. So that's what the workbook looks like. I will tell you, it's online, but it's not quite as interactive as some websites we're used to seeing. It is a downloadable PDF file, and if you're going to develop your own plan, what I recommend is when you find this PDF file online, that you download that to your computer, and then you begin to fill out the workbook. And that way you can save it so that you don't lose your work. So as you go through the workbook, you answer yes and no questions about your operation, and then you start to select BMPs that might apply to your operation. So this is an example of an ag water quality plan, which is simply that list of BMPs that you're going to implement on the farm. We'll talk a little more detail about some of these BMPs in a minute, but we don't have a lot of time to go through those. But this is simply your ag water quality plan. So if somebody says, hey, I need a copy of your ag water quality plan, what you need to produce to them is the list of your best management practices. And then also, you'll also need to sign a self-certification sheet. And that just says that you agree that to the best of your ability, you are going to implement those best management practices on your farm. And then what we also recommend is you file these 2 pieces of paper with your local conservation district office. And that way you have a backup of your records, but also keep a copy yourself at home in your farm records. But if you get a call from Kentucky Division of Water and there's a complaint about your operation, or they want to inspect your operation and see that you do indeed have a water quality plan, these are the 2 documents you'll need to produce. So let's talk a little bit about a few BMPs, or best management practices. So I mentioned that forestry is one of those sections of the workbook, and so I'm not going through all of the forestry BMPs. Eric and Chad will go through some of those a little bit later and give you additional information. But one example would be using streamside management zones. And so this image just shows you that it's leaving trees adjacent to a stream, and the density and the width of that buffer really is dependent on the type of stream as well as the slope surrounding that area. So using streamside management zones are very effective at reducing erosion. So you want to keep soil in place. That's always a good thing for a landowner. We don't want to send our soil resources downstream to a neighbor. So holding them in place with buffers along water bodies is always a good idea. Another forestry BMP deals with sinkholes, sinking streams, and caves. So one thing that I find a little interesting or strange about the ag water quality plan is that forestry is the only place in the plan that karst and karst topography is really addressed. So sinkholes, sinking streams, caves, those type of landscape features, you'll maybe see somebody who is a livestock operator, like what you see in this image, And they will need to include Forestry BMP number 4 in their plan because it deals with sinkholes and sinking streams. And many of us have those on our farms. So that's why we point that out as a BMP. Livestock also is a section. And so these are 2 BMPs, planned grazing system and proper stocking density. Those are examples of BMPs that really make good agricultural sense. They basically mean you're going to use rotational grazing. So our BMPs also make good agronomic sense. And so we try to make sure those are kept up to date and reflect that. Nutrient management is a really important thing. These 2 water bodies don't look very appetizing to me, but they are things that we might see in the landscape this time of year, and especially in the warmer months. So managing nutrients on the landscape is exceptionally important, whether you have a cropping operation or a livestock operation. Utilizing nutrients in the form of manure or in fertilizer, super important for keeping the nutrients in the soil and out of the waterways. Also, septic systems are covered. So in the farmstead section, it deals with some of our structures and also homes. So if you have a homestead on your property, you have a septic system, we do recommend that that system is inspected and or pumped every 3 to 5 years to make sure that that is in good working condition and is also protecting water quality. So I mentioned the state cost share program. Just want to make sure that folks know that there are cost share programs available for producers who want to implement conservation practices on their farm, but might need a little financial assistance. So the state cost share program can offer up to 75% reimbursement rate on some best management practices. This is a list from a couple of years ago of some of their higher priority practices. And you'll see, you probably won't be able to move through these as quickly as I am, but they're riparian forest buffer and riparian herbaceous cover. Those are 2, and tree and shrub establishment. Those are some practices that might be related to your forest land and your land management, but lots of practices related to managing nutrients and conserving soil resources. Also, there are federal cost share programs available through the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And just know that if state cost share doesn't cover some practices you're interested in implementing, you might also look for practices in the federal programs. And some of those include wildlife habitat enhancement. And I know Matt's got some experience with some of those as well. And those are always a good source of resources. So I'll finish up here and just remind folks that there's some simple steps to protect water quality on the farm. Developing and implementing your ag water quality plan, super important. Not only is it the law, but it also protects water resources for you and your future generations that may run your farm. Implement a nutrient management plan. Get a soil test. That goes hand in hand with managing nutrients, whether you're in an urban setting and you're going to put fertilizer on your lawn, or you're going to apply fertilizer in your agricultural field. Installing stream buffers, those are by far my favorite conservation practice, but then also handling farm chemicals wisely and disposing of your dead animals properly. Nothing gets the attention of a nosy neighbor quicker than an animal that has not been disposed of properly. So remember, if it's on the ground, it's in your water. And at this point, I believe Billy will share with us a video that we made with a forest landowner, and the Pels give a great example of how they manage their forest resources and use cost share to do so.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I'll go ahead and pull that video up and we can talk a little bit more, but really nice job there. So we'll go ahead and share the Pels video now. And I will mention that Harry and Karen Pell, who we're going to be showing here in a second, were the former Tree Farmers of the Year and just outstanding stewards of their property and land, just really great people.
After living and working in the city, Harry and Karen Pell were looking for an escape from the everyday hustle and bustle. Over time, the Pells traded city life for a different kind of hustle, the kind that goes along with managing a 1,500-acre woodland they call Tallow Creek Farm. They have since received multiple accolades for being good stewards of their woodlands, but it didn't happen overnight.
We were looking for a place to hunt, so we came back here and hunted on this place a time or two and ended up buying it.
And when we came, it was nothing here. There was no water, no ponds.
The first summer we came down here, camped and working and cleaning up stuff and all that. We said, that was our first project, was this pond right here. He said, man, we got to get some water.
The farm lies in both Taylor and Marion counties in south central Kentucky. As the Pells spent more and more time on the farm, they realized they wanted to find a way to make it pay for itself long into the future. Neither Harry nor Karen had a background in farming, but they did know how to be resourceful. That's when they considered managing their land for timber production.
You know, I'm not a farmer, and I'm not confused about that. So if I planted the row crop, it wouldn't turn out too good, I don't think. So we started with the Fish and Game guys, Department of Wildlife, Fish and Wildlife, and they said, well, you know, you ought to get a forest stewardship plan and get a forester out here. And so we did that, and you know, then we heard about some different things with NRCS and got a flyer or two from UK Extension, and we got interested in the woodland owners and the woodland owner short courses. Boy, those things are great for people that you know, that own ground, and then the Kentucky woodland owners, and you know, every resource we can get our hands on, we try to use. And they've all helped us a lot.
Over time, the Pells have taken advantage of programs offered through state and federal agencies. Through these landowner-focused programs, the Pells learned to manage their woodlands using techniques like timber stand improvement and wildlife habitat improvement. By actively managing their land, they have set their farm up to be a valuable resource now and for generations to come. Their efforts have not gone unnoticed, and they have been awarded the Kentucky Tree Farmer of the Year, Kentucky Forest Stewards of the Year, Kentucky Fish and Wildlife State Landowner of the Year, and most recently, the 2017 Kentucky Leopold Conservation Award. All of these awards are given in recognition of voluntary stewardship and management of Kentucky's natural resources.
You know, that's our goal, is to try to keep this place a functioning large piece of property over the next few generations, and the only way it's going to be able to do that is if it can sustain itself, and the trees are what's going to do that. So I'm working with my grandkids to improve their harvest when they harvest this place.
I think they all love it. I think they've really learned a lot from him on, you know, how to take care of it, and I think it's something that'll stay in the family for generations.
When you open the paper and you see a 100-acre farm chopped up into 15 lots of, you know, 8 acres apiece, and once it's sold like that, it's never coming back. That's why I want to see this place sustain itself, and that means it's got to pay its way, you know. And the only shot this place got at paying its way, it's not farm ground, is the timber. So that's why we manage this timber, and my grandsons are learning a lot about it, and that's what will keep this place as one big piece of ground, if that's possible. You know, who knows what's coming down the line, but if the income's there, then the farm's got a shot.
By utilizing best management practices included in their Kentucky Agriculture Water Quality Plan and programs offered by state and federal agencies and organizations like the Kentucky Woodland Owners Association, the Pells are well equipped to continue managing their woodlands responsibly into the future. For more information about developing your Kentucky Agriculture Water Quality Plan or to learn more about forest stewardship, visit our websites.
Again, Dr. Gumbert, for coming in and doing that and sharing that video. That was great. Anybody who has a question, please put them in the chat pod, and Amanda can answer them for you. And but first of all, Mandy, if you don't mind turning your video back on, and I was just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. One, if somebody needs assistance on getting a water quality plan, where do they go? How do you even start this whole process?
Well, that's a good question, and many new landowners might have no idea where to begin. And the best place to go is the local conservation district office. There are 121 conservation district offices throughout the state, And they are kind of the point place for developing ag water quality plans. But also don't forget your Cooperative Extension Service office, because they can also provide lots of information. So conservation districts typically will help get through the mechanics of developing the plan, and then for more technical support information, the Extension Office or even the Natural Resources Conservation Service also has practices that they can give technical information on.
Andy, I really enjoyed your segments today, and the video was great. Just really drives home the point of taking care of our resources and being good stewards of our land, and just reinforces how important our forest land is to water and water quality. So really appreciate all that you do to try to help keep the waters of Kentucky as good as they can be. So thank you so much for all of your work here in the state. We really appreciate it.
Very important job.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show and for highlighting water quality.
Yeah. Well, I hope you'll stick around, because we're still going to continue talking about water and water quality here today. We've got next up, we have Mr. Eric Gracie. Eric is a forester here in our department. He works with the Center for Forest and Wood Certification, but he's also a former employee of the Kentucky Division of Forestry. So we've asked Eric to give us an overview of the forest management, best management practices here in Kentucky, which is really tied in very closely to the Ag Water Quality Plan and what's going on with that. So Eric, if you don't mind, bring your video up a sec. Hey, good morning, sir. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Well, thanks
All right,
again,
so,
Eric, for joining us. We greatly appreciate you being on the show.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all. Hopefully
Yeah.
it will be informative and halfway enjoyable.
Yes, I'm sure it will, Eric. So we've taken you out of the cooking realm and put you into the technical realm of protecting our water during timber harvesting operations. So just shows your flexibility, Eric, your range, if you will. So we
Yeah.
appreciate it very much.
The cooking side has more of a enjoyable after reward, but doesn't pay the bills.
No doubt, and we need clean water. So let's
Right.
let's learn a little bit about the best management practices for forestry specifically here with Eric's presentation. So Renee, I'll go ahead and pull up Eric's presentation now.
All right.
Thank you, Billy and Renee. If I didn't mention it during the introductions, the purpose of the PowerPoint is really to provide a general overview of logging BMPs, and the overview of the non-point source pollution associated with logging. And really, I wanted to shine a light on the Kentucky Logging BMP Field Guide. This field guide was redone in the fall of 2018, and it is one of the best field guides that I've seen. I may be a little bit biased, but it is an awesome tool for both loggers, foresters, and forest landowners. It will really go a long ways in getting BMPs implemented correctly, understanding the Forest Conservation Act and everything associated with responsible logging. So let's start with going through the types of logging pollution. The most common logging pollution is sediment, and this just occurs from the roads and trails and landing network that's needed to extract the timber from the forest. So almost all the BMPs are geared towards preventing mud from entering the stream channel or reducing the amount of mud that's going to enter into the stream channels. So the next type of logging pollution is just logging debris itself. So particularly in the hardwood stands, it's typical for the saw logs to be extracted and the tops to be cut off and left laying on the forest floor. Was oftentimes those tops have to be pushed or dragged around to get them out of the way of the operation. And if people aren't using, paying attention and using good judgment, it's easy for those tops to get pushed into the stream channels. What this does is you eventually create a dam situation, and the water will have to cut the banks to get around this dam, and that leads to bank erosion and sedimentation in the stream. Also, as this woody material starts to break down, the rotting process will reduce the dissolved oxygen in the stream and can affect the aquatic life in the stream. Another type is increased water temperature. When you take the overstory trees off of a perennial stream, you're likely going to increase the temperature of that stream, and some species are temperature sensitive. The first one that always comes to mind is trout, but there are many other species that need cooler water. Also, that the higher water temperatures will reduce the dissolved oxygen levels and can also cause aquatic harm. Fluids. So all logging operations typically will have a handful of heavy machinery that contain a tremendous amount of just diesel fuel, oil, hydraulic fluids, and loggers need to be mindful of where they park their equipment and prevent any leaks from entering the waterway. If they have to do maintenance on site, they have to dispose of it properly. So these are issues that can come up during an operation, because at some point in time, almost all logging equipment is going to have breakdowns and issues with leaking hoses, and loggers need to be prepared for those. Trash, and this is pretty self-explanatory. This is just logging crews need to take care of the personal trash, and this is pretty easy resolved with just having a 55-gallon barrel on the site. So there are 10 silvicultural best management practices in Kentucky, and 7 of them are directly involve almost all timber harvesting operations, and 3 are more associated with tree planting and pesticide and herbicide use. So the BMP manual does a real good job of going through the minimum requirements that are needed to be in compliance with the and they are from pages 9 through 12 in the manual. And I mentioned being in compliance. So in 2000, the Kentucky Forest Conservation Act went into effect, and this requires that all commercial harvesting operations have meet the minimum requirements for BMP. So BMPs are mandatory. It also requires that commercial logging operations have someone on site and in charge that has gone through the Kentucky Master Logger program. So the BMP manual does a real good job explaining that, and it also does a really good job of explaining the logging inspection process and the enforcement process that's done by the Kentucky Division of Forestry. So that's real good, helpful information there. The manual talks about planning. Planning is something that's not always done on harvesting operations, and this can go a long ways to eliminating some of the issues that come up. So really we're trying to encourage landowners to really ask to see the loggers' harvest plan prior to them starting. The manual goes through the different types of water bodies and sensitive areas that we have in the state, and directly talks about the BMPs that are necessary to protect those waterways, such as perennial streams, which have water year round. There are different BMPs associated with those versus ephemeral channels that only carry water during and directly after a rain and snow event. Streamside management zones, the manual does a really good job addressing these. So a streamside management zone for perennial waterways, one, it requires the retention of some overstory trees, which eliminates that temperature increase pollution, and it also provides buffer strips for sedimentation to be filtered out before it reaches the streams. The manual has a lot of these good charts like that breaks down the requirements visually, and so for, like you can see here on lower slope properties, the tree width only has to be 20 feet. The distance from the roads and trails only have to be 50 feet because there's less potential for erosion, and the way the sun angles hit that creek, that the 25-foot buffer protects the stream temperatures. On steeper ground, those distances are doubled. Crossings. So crossings are very important in the process of reducing erosion. This is the point in time where the roads and the trail network actually make direct contact with the streams themselves. And I've seen in some research that 80 to 90% sedimentation can sometimes be attributed to these crossing sites. So the manual goes through several different crossing options. And also one of the changes is that that where feasible and it's economically possible, that elevated stream crossings are required as part of the minimum BMPs. We're really trying to avoid situations like this where these were not rock bottom streams, not, the banks were deep soil, and loggers choosing to ford those creeks versus put in an elevated crossing. So the types of elevated crossings are these wooden skidder bridges and crane mats. The crane mats normally do not have the span of the bridges, so you have to put a middle support in them, but they're easier to maneuver and store, and a lot of guys are moving towards crane mats versus the skidder bridges. Other common elevated, probably the most common elevated crossing is a culvert pipe. And you can see on the left, when you have a narrow stream, you can get by with just a single pipe and some fill over top of that. And then on the right, where you had a much wider stream, they've got the pipe to allow the water to go through, and then pole timber that is laid adjacent to that pipe, which still allows water to pass through, but then not nearly as much fill material is needed and put in that stream when you go this method versus just a single pipe and having to use tons of fill dirt to secure that pipe. One of the neat things is there's a lot of tables and charts in the manual. So for here, this kind of gives you a guide on the different types of crossings, options, and when that crossing would be suitable based on the time of year and the types of streams. The guide goes into the retirement of the logging job. So it addresses water bars, which the construction, the spacing requirements based on slope. The steeper the ground is, the closer the water bars are going to need to be placed. It also goes into revegetation of the trails, provides seed mix options based on time of year, how well the soil was been able to be sclerified, because a lot of times these sites and trails get heavily compacted, and getting good germination on them can be very difficult at times. So like I said, that we're just going to kind of touch on things, but we have a really good network of BMP publications on our website. You can also find the BMP guide itself there, and we do have the spiral bound field guides available. You just need to contact the extension office. And a good source for more information on BMPs is the Kentucky Master Logger website. And I would encourage folks that have an interest to take the 3-day program. There's a lot of good information that can be gleaned in this from this program. So just be happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thanks again, Eric. We greatly appreciate you doing that presentation on the BMPs. And remember, if anybody has a question, they can type them in the chat pod, and Eric will answer them for you. But one thing I had a question on is who's actually responsible for BMPs on someone's property?
Okay, well, outside of the logging operation, the landowner is going to be responsible for BMPs related to any type of forestry, if they're using the roads and stuff for hunting or what have you. Once a logger comes in and they're going to temporarily take control of that to harvest site, and part of the Conservation Act is that they are responsible for implementing the minimum BMP requirements. So the landowner, however, needs to know what those minimum requirements are, and also they can inadvertently take control of that logging operation if they give instructions for the loggers. So a common one when I was doing inspections is the landowner would want the culvert pipe to remain on site because they wanted to use the road for their own purpose. Well, the law actually requires that culvert pipe to be removed. So if they've instructed the logger to leave that culvert pipe in place, then they, in a sense, have taken over the harvest. And if there's any issues with that pipe down the road, causing sedimentation, then the landowner would be responsible for any type of damages versus, during that harvest and immediately after the harvest, the logger would be ultimately responsible.
It sounds like a very good, interesting and complex answer. So we will.
Well, yeah, sorry. You start getting into laws and
exactly. That's one thing I wanted people to know.
Yeah. So it's really, that's the landowners, it's their land. So that ultimately they need to know what's required of the loggers and what's required of them. And hopefully BMP manual and the guide that Mandy talked about will help folks make good decisions and educate themselves.
Yeah, I would agree, Eric. I think those two resources that you and Dr. Gumbert brought up are really just amazing resources that will help landowners navigate many of these questions. So please take advantage of that. And Renee, hopefully we can get those posted on our FromTheWoodsToday.com or links to those to make it a little bit easier. But you can certainly, if you all have questions right now, I encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity. We also have with us today Mr. Chad Nyman. Chad works in our department as well. He's a extension forester, but he works primarily with the logging and the primary wood industry. So Chad, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add to the conversation that we've had today, or anything maybe that you've dealt with loggers regarding some of these and maybe some of the questions that they might have on some of this. If you have anything to add, that'd be great.
So the laws are there, but just having a good contract on the front end of that harvest with that logger helps to make them aware that that's important to you, that they're going to follow those laws and regulations, and protects you legally as well.
Yeah.
So we did have a question about our crane mats available for woodland owners to purchase.
Yes, and we actually, about a year and a half ago, I put together a small list of local Kentucky suppliers of these crane mats, and I'll see if I can pull that up and send that link in the chat box. That way, folks can source those locally from our forests and forest industries.
Yeah, that would be a great resource for them. And if not, if we can't find it during the show, we'll definitely post it on the site, if nothing else. But like I said, people don't forget, if you have any questions, now's the time to put them in the chat pod so that we can get those answered.
Yeah, certainly. Water quality, again, it's one of those things that kind of gets overlooked when we think about our forests. So, anything that we can do to protect water quality helps us all. It saves us from our costs of treating our water, which would make our water rates go up. So, if we are good stewards of the water, it really pays us down the road as well. So, Eric and Amanda and Chad, really appreciate y'all coming on and being part of this segment. Hopefully we get a few more questions for you before this thing is over. But I think here in a minute, we're going to be switching gears to talk about something that's really important to water quality, as well as one of the trees that grows near that. So we're going to try to bring Laurie Thomas on. Laurie is an extension forester here in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources with us. And Laurie has been doing the Tree of the Week segments. And Laurie, it's a very fitting species we have this week, since we've been talking so much about water quality. And I gave a little teaser that this was one of the largest growing trees that we can get really in the eastern U.S.
Yeah, today as Tree of the Week is American sycamore, and it is considered at least the largest in diameter. Maybe not the tallest of our eastern deciduous trees, but definitely the largest in diameter. And it's a great riparian species. So, it likes to grow once its feet wet. It likes to be near the water. So this is, if you're doing any reforestation projects around streams and whatnot, this could be a good tree to throw into the mix of those that you would plant there, because it's going to do well. Chances are it may seed in on its own anyway. So here's American sycamore. Hi there. I'm Laurie Thomas with the University of Kentucky Forestry and Natural Resource Extension, and I'm here with the Tree of the Week, the American sycamore. American sycamore, Platanus occidentalis, is one of the largest and perhaps the greatest in diameter of eastern hardwood trees. It is also known as American plane tree, sycamore, and the buttonball tree. It is a fast-growing, long-lived tree which can live up to 200 to 600 years. Sycamore is a massive tree with heavy spreading branches that grows over 100 feet tall and 3 to 8 feet in diameter. This species is easily identified from a distance due to its eye-catching white and gray exfoliating and mottled bark, sometimes referred to as camouflage bark. American sycamore is a species of wide distribution across the eastern and central United States. It commonly occurs along the banks of waterways and adjacent bottomlands and disturbed sites. It is recommended for planting on all types of surface mined land and is useful in rehabilitation of various sites with saturated soils. It is often a natural early colonizer of disturbed sites such as old fields, spoil banks, and stream banks degraded by channelization. It is classed as intermediate in shade tolerance. The American sycamore is a deciduous tree with leaves that are alternately arranged on the twig, as you can see in the photo. The relatively large leaf is simple in form, meaning it's made up of one blade. The leaves are typically 4 to 8 inches wide with 3 to 5 palmate lobes, which means the midribs radiate from one point at the base of the leaf. You can see in the photo the leaf has 3 main midribs that start at the base of the leaf. The leaf margins are coarsely serrated. The underside of the leaf can be pubescent, especially along the veins. It is warm green on the upper side and light in color on the underside. American sycamore fall foliage is not particularly showy. It's typically yellow-orange to a brown. American sycamore is monoecious, meaning both male and female flowers occur on the same tree. The flowers are very small and are in dense round clusters. They appear with the leaves in the spring, and the flowers are wind-pollinated. The fruit is a ball composed of many closely packed, long, narrow fruits called achenes. They ripen in the fall, usually by November or a little earlier. The fruit may remain on the tree over winter, breaking up or falling off the following spring. Each tiny seed is surrounded at the base by a circle of upright hairs that act like a parachute for the seed. As the seed ball breaks up, the seeds are released and float slowly down to the ground or are carried by the wind or water, where they may be deposited on mudflats and sandbars where conditions are usually favorable for germination. Sycamore can begin seed production early, but in natural dense stand, seed production starts around 25 years, with bed seed production between 50 and 200 years. Trees usually have a good seed crop every 1 to 2 years. The bark is the most striking feature and one of the best identifying characteristics, and has led to the sycamore being a popular landscape tree in larger landscapes. The bark at the base of the trunk tends to be brownish and scaly. The upper portions of the trunk are characteristically mottled brown, white, green, and gray by the exfoliation of the outer bark, exposing the light, creamy, white inner bark layer. It is often referred to as camouflage bark. American sycamore does provide benefits for wildlife. The seeds are eaten by a few birds, including purple finch, goldfinch, chickadees, and dark-eyed juncos, and a few mammals, including beaver and squirrel. As the tree ages, cavities can develop in the trunks, which provide nesting habitat for cavity nesters such as the barred owl and eastern screech owl, as well as wood ducks. American sycamore has white to light tan sapwood, and the heartwood is a darker reddish brown. Sycamore wood has a distinctive ray fleck that can be seen on quarter sawn surfaces, which gives the wood a freckled appearance and is sometimes called lacewood, as you can see in the photo on the left. It has a fine texture similar to maple, and overall it's easy to work with both hand and machine tools. However, its interlocking grain can make it troublesome in surfacing and machining operations, and the wood is not decay resistant. The wood is used for veneer, plywood, interior trim, pallets and crates, furniture, musical instruments, particle board, paper and pulpwood, tool handles, and other turned objects. The national champion American sycamore is in Ashland, Ohio. It's 432 inches or 36 feet in circumference, 124 feet tall with an 88-foot crown spread. The Kentucky champion is in Harrison County, and it's 320 inches or a little over 26 feet in circumference, 137 feet tall with a 137-foot crown spread. If you'd like to know more about champion trees, check out American Forest Champion Tree National Register or go to the Kentucky Division of Forestry Champion Trees. Now for a few fun facts about American sycamore. In 1802, Francois Michaud, a noted French botanist who wrote the North American Sylva, reportedly measured a sycamore that was 47 feet in circumference on the north bank of the Ohio River. Native Americans used sycamore for a variety of medicinal purposes, including cold and cough remedies, as well as dietary, dermatological, respiratory, and gastrointestinal aids. Sycamore seeds are very tiny and lightweight. The seeds average about 200,000 seeds per pound. There are two American sycamores that are considered witness trees of the American Revolution at Valley Forge, the Maxwell sycamore and the Paulding sycamore. It is believed they were standing during the pivotal winter when General George Washington and his army camped at Valley Forge. I hope you've enjoyed learning about this American giant, the American sycamore, and get a chance to get out into your woodland, local park, or neighborhood and enjoy the substantial sycamore.
Some of those pictures that she showed were absolutely amazing. There was a huge tree, and that owl looked very content in his tree there. Lori, I'm kind of assuming that they get the button ball name from the
fruit.
Exactly. Yeah,
yep, exactly. Yeah. And it makes sense. You know, we tend to name things, use descriptives, and that would be a good example of that. And especially since they'll hold on to the fruit many times through the winter, so you can really see those little brown. I mean, it almost looks like a decorated tree, you know, all through the winter, like it's got little Christmas ornaments on it. So
yeah, that's spray them a color, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, one of the things I was going to say, Renee, one of the things I love about the sycamore is not only is its bark so distinctive and, you know, just unique, it really is, but the wood is absolutely gorgeous. You know, some of those pictures you showed, Laurie, are just amazing. And I know that here in our house, we've got some nice wood carvings and boxes that use sycamore, and it's a really underappreciated wood.
Mm-hmm. It is. That ray fleck is really beautiful in there, so. Yeah,
so I was trying to figure out that last one. Was that actually a tree that it looked like a tree that had went down into the ground and came back out. I was trying to tell what that picture was at the end.
So that's the Paulings one at Valley Forge, so one of the witness trees. And the reason they think that the sycamores were still left because, you know, I mean, when the troops were there in the middle of the winter in the during at Valley Forge with Washington, they basically cut down all of the trees that were there for firewood, for cooking, and for some type of quarters, you know, places to live in. But sycamore isn't a really good fuel wood. So they think that that's why there were three of them. There's only two left now, while those sycamores were left there because not good fuel wood. So, but yes, that's where its branches, you know, it has big, heavy branches. That's, you know, now it's become open grown, and where those limbs have landed on the ground, but it's still growing is what that is. So,
all right. Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. You know, definitely I would say a favorite tree of mine, especially it's one of those that if you're out in the woods or you're even on a drive, you can see them from a distance, especially in the winter with that blue sky and that beautiful white bark. And you go, I know there's a creek over there. It's a great tree.
Yeah, no doubt. Another great segment, Laurie. Thank you so much. The trees of the week are awesome.
So next week we're doing common persimmon. Which is good because the fruit's out and it's not ripe yet, but we can talk about that because I know Dr. Springer is going to be talking about food plots, and that could be a nice addition. And we also have Martha Yount is going to be talking about some Cook Wild Kentucky, so it kind of all goes together next week.
Another cooking show. Awesome.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, Renee, we've done it again. Another amazing show. A big thanks to all of our guests today. Dr. Amanda Gumbert talking about the Ag Water Quality Plan, and Eric Gracie talking about the Forestry Best Management Practices with assistance from Chad, and then Laurie's Tree of the Week. So we appreciate all you all being with us today, whether it's via Zoom or Facebook Live. And I guess we'll encourage them to join us next week at 11 o'clock from thewoods.com.
Yep. And always remember that if you missed a show or like, oh, what did they say about that? Which is something I do quite often. You can go to fromthewoodstoday.com and watch the show again, and we post them there. So until then, everybody join us again next Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Take care.